Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to day 20 of the Chad Daybell Doomsday Cold Murder Trial with live coverage from Disorder in the Court. I woke up to some rather shocking news about a somewhat sudden death in the true crime community. So I've been kind of processing that a little bit. I just want to give my deepest condolences to the friends and family of Heels in the Air, who put out a lot of very informative and funny videos about true crime, tragedy pimps. I used a lot of them in my videos in my other channel. And in fact, she and I were in the middle of planning a panel about Jonathan Lee Riches, and she has suddenly left us. For more information, you can check out the panel that was done last night on Queen Bee's channel. I didn't know her that well. I know her a little bit. I talked to her a couple of times behind the scenes. She was always extremely helpful. And I personally just hate death. And, it's one of those things that you just have to learn to live with is death, because life comes with death. But I hate it for all the people that hurt around it. And there's a lot of people hurting this morning. Good morning, Rachel. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Chad Daybell and the deaths that he caused, most likely. Well, he did. Let's just face it. So let's get to it. They are underway, and they have called another, I believe, medical examiner to the stand. Morning, Stacy.
All right, thank you. Before we inquire, I'll just ask, have you been watching any of the trial testimony since this case began?
Morning.
Good morning.
Could you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
My name is Catherine Dace,
Morning, Tommy.
K-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E-D-A-C-E.
Ms. Dace, what is your occupation or profession?
I am a forensic biologist and supervisor with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services in Meridian, Idaho.
So is that a lab?
It is.
Do you know if that lab is accredited?
Yes, we are accredited by the American Association for Laboratory Accreditation. Additionally, the biology section is accredited to the FBI quality assurance standards.
And how long have you been employed by the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab?
Since 2016.
Is that the first forensics lab you've worked at?
No.
What other labs have you worked at?
I began my career in 2008 with the Denver Police Department as a forensic biologist. I worked there until 2012, at which point I went to work for a military contractor performing DNA testing overseas for approximately 1 year. After that, I went to the Texas Department of Public Safety in Austin, Texas for approximately 2 years before coming to Idaho.
And would you describe for the jury your educational background?
I have a bachelor's of science degree in forensic biology from West Virginia University.
And did your formal education include the study of DNA?
It did.
Did that education include hands-on work with DNA testing techniques?
Yes, at each one of my employers, I completed a formal training program encompassing the duties that I would perform. These included things like scientific literature reviews, practice samples, practice cases, oral and written exams, competency cases, and supervised casework.
And are you
Good
certified?
morning,
by any
Christina.
chance?
Hello, Kathy
Yes,
R.
I am certified by the American Board of Criminalistics in molecular biology.
And what are your duties and responsibilities at the Idaho State Forensics Lab?
I examine items of evidence for the presence of biological fluids and material and attempt to generate DNA profiles from those items. I will then compare DNA profiles I obtain to known reference samples in the case. And as a supervisor, I handle case management and personnel matters.
Ms. Days, did you receive evidence in the case of the state versus Chad Daybell?
I did.
And is that evidence identified in your lab by the number M2020-2233?
It is.
In general, what evidence did you receive into your lab in this case?
I received autopsy samples from J.J. Vallow, including oral swabs, rectal swabs, penile swabs, hand swabs, and nail swabs. We received tape from around his hands, ankles, mouth, tape and plastic from around his head, and tape and plastic that the body was wrapped in. I received 2 swabs from an apartment in Rexburg, Idaho. I received tools and a necklace from the Daybell property. And I received known reference samples in this case for J.J. Vallow, Tylee Ryan, Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, Melanie Gibb, Richard Mao, and Dennis Trahan.
And did other individuals in your lab also perform work on this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 421. This is an Idaho State Lab report by Riley Nolan. I believe it comes in by way of stipulation.
It's by stipulation, Judge.
Very well. Exhibit 421, having been offered without objection, is admitted.
Ms. Days, can you just quickly review the first couple pages of that? And what is that?
This is a DNA report written by our laboratory,
Right. And who wrote that specific report?
Riley Nowlin.
And are you familiar with Riley?
Yes, she is my supervisor and our laboratory manager.
Right. And do you know what the purpose of that report was?
This was parentage comparisons between samples from presumed to be J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan and Lori Vallow and J.J.'s father, Dennis Trahan.
And Your Honor, may I publish that for the jury?
Yes, you may.
I almost called you Ms. Nowlin. Ms. Days, can you explain to the jury the evidence description, the items that were being tested in this specific report?
There are molars presumed to be from Tylee Ryan. There's a reference sample from Lori Vallow, a reference sample from Dennis Trahan, and we previously obtained a DNA profile from a tooth presumed to be from J.J. Vallow.
Hi, Patricia.
Can you just read into the record the conclusions and interpretations of that report?
Yes. So based upon evaluation of the DNA profiles obtained from item 23 and 25, Lori Vallow cannot be excluded as being the biological mother of the deceased individual said to be Tylee Ryan. The single parentage index for the loci examined is 2,528,000,000. At least 99.9999, there's 4 nines, of the female population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the biological mother of Tylee Ryan.
So that's not language that most of us usually use, right? Can you explain to the jury what that conclusion and interpretation means?
So you get half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father. And so at every location, you are expected to share DNA from your parent to your child. And so this looks at the DNA between the presumed child and the parent and compares whether or not that person could be the parent of that individual. In this case, Lori Vallow is included as being the mother of the remains of Tylee Ryan.
And then if you could read the next paragraph, and I'll turn the page.
The DNA profile obtained from item 32 is consistent with the profile previously obtained from item 21, an additional reference sample from Dennis Trahan.
And if you could read that top.
Based upon the evaluation of the DNA profile obtained from item 32, as well as the profile previously obtained from item 16.1, Dennis Trahan cannot be excluded as being the biological father of the deceased individual said to be Joshua J. Vallow. The single parentage index for the loci examined is 5,602,000. At least 99.9999 of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the biological father of Joshua J. Vallow.
And again, because that's not language most of us use, can you just briefly explain what that said for the jury?
It said that Dennis Trahan cannot be excluded as being the father of those remains. So he is included as being the biological father.
Thank you. So Ms. Dace, we had, before we went over that lab report, talked about some of the items you received in this case. Did you mention receiving bags?
Yes.
Let's talk about those. What kind of bags were they? What did they look like?
It was a white plastic, appeared to be a grocery bag from around the head, and there was tape on it. And then there were several black, what looked like black trash bags that were wrapped in tape that the body was wrapped in. However, those items, when we received them, had already been removed. So we received just the tape and the plastic separately.
From those bags, were you ever able to locate or generate a DNA profile from any material located on those bags?
So I did not do any DNA testing on the bags. I did do DNA testing on the tape. So I assisted Tara Martinez in collecting hairs and fibers from the tape. Most of the tape and plastic had decomposition fluid present. And so I tested those items for blood and they were positive. When examining the tape, I was looking for irregular edges that could indicate someone might have torn the tape with their teeth and left behind saliva. So I did swab a few of the tape ends, and then after latent print processing, I went back and swabbed areas of an identifiable fingerprint ridge detail in an attempt to get a DNA profile.
Were you able to generate any profiles?
I obtained one DNA profile from the tape from JJ's hands, and it was consistent with him.
You said that some of the fluid tested positive for blood.
Yes.
Is that accurate? And where was that located specifically?
On all of the tape and the plastic.
And did you do any DNA testing on that blood?
No.
Why not?
It was presumed to be the victims. During decomposition, your body breaks down. And so decomposition fluid often has blood in it. And a lot of the tape still had lots of small hairs and apparent skin attached to it in addition to the blood. And all of that would be expected to be JJ's DNA.
Did you receive a chain and a pendant as part of the items that were brought to the lab?
I did.
Did you test those for the presence of blood?
I did. It was negative.
You mentioned some swabs from an apartment 175.
Yes.
Tell us what you did with those items.
There was a swab from a knife blade, and it was negative for blood. There was also a swab from a wall, and it was very weakly positive for blood. And that would have been consumptive to test for DNA, so we did not perform DNA analysis.
I want to talk to you about some of the tools you received. Do you recall in general which tools you received?
Yes, I received 18 tools from a garage barn on the Daybell property. They included a post hole digger, a garden hoe, shovels, a pickaxe, axes, shears, and hand saws.
Did you do any type of testing on any of those tools?
Yes, they were requested for blood and human remains. So I did find quite a few small stains on handles of many of the tools that did test positive for blood. They were very small and would have been consumptive to test. So I did not perform DNA testing on those. On 4 of the tools, I located what I thought could be human remains, and I collected that material. I photographed it, and then I performed DNA testing on a portion of it.
Um, so that was on 4 tools.
Yes,
Did you take pictures of those items as part of your report?
I did.
So tell us a little more about that process of when you bring in a tool or a sample, like what specifically are you looking for and how do you go about testing it?
So the first thing we do is we open the item and photograph it. I did collect hairs and fibers if I saw them. Some of the tools were quite dirty, so I needed to remove the dirt in order to see the surface of the item. And so I did that as well. I also removed some ashes from several of the items. And then I go about looking for stains that have the appearance of blood or could possibly be blood mixed with, say, dirt or ashes or something like that. And then I do presumptive blood testing to see if any of these items maybe should be for DNA.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask the witness be handed State's Exhibit 201A through 201R. The court and counsel have been provided a copy.
And on that exhibit, Mr. Wood, it appears that all of those letters are inclusive, A through R, correct?
I believe so. I'll double check.
Confirmed with my courtesy copies, just making sure none were removed out of the sequence.
201A through.
These are photos I took during my examination of the tools and of hairs and fibers collected from the tape.
And you said these are photos you took yourself.
Yes,
Now, some of these photos have markings on them. Are these markings that you placed on the photographs?
yes, or the item itself, depending on what it was.
And are those markings a part of your regular testing procedures?
Yes,
And are these pictures true and accurate copies of the photographs you took?
they are.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibit 201A through R be entered into evidence.
No objection.
Okay, exhibits 2201 A through R are all admitted.
Ms. Dace, if I ask about item 36.4, do you know which one that is?
It's a shovel.
And is that a number that your lab assigned to that tool?
Yes, item 36 was a collection of tools from the garage barn.
Can you tell, well, Your Honor, I'd ask that I be allowed to publish.
You may.
Is that item 36? Is that item 36.4?
Yes,
Okay. And it's kind of hard to see the writing on there. Tell us what you did with this shovel.
I examined it for blood and I swabbed all of the ends of the tools. I did not run them for DNA, but we did swab for preservation. So those dashed blue lines that you see indicate the sampling I took from there. And then I also collected some possible human remains from this item.
Can you tell us what we're seeing in State's Exhibit 201B? Zoom out for you.
So the area on the right side of the photo was what I thought could be possible charred flesh. It's a little hard to see here, but it had a little bit more of a pinkish tan hue than the rest of the dirt and everything around it. So I collected that, and then I took a photograph and I ran a portion of it for DNA.
And what does the jury see in State's Exhibit 201C?
This is a close-up of that material that I collected. And then the blue box indicates the portion of it that I ran for DNA.
Were you able to generate a DNA profile from that material?
I was not.
Can you tell me about lab item 36.5?
I believe it's another shovel.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201D. Do you recognize that image?
I do. I took that photograph.
Is that item 36.5?
Yes.
And what, did you do any type of testing on this item?
I did the same as with the other tools. I tested for blood and then examined the tool head for blood or human remains.
Was there any material that caught your attention?
There was.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201E. What does the jury see in this image?
Could you slide the photo up a little bit so you can
That-
see the labeling at the bottom? There we go. So this is again, more material I collected from the shovel. It has a little bit different look than just dirt. It's more tan, and the pieces on the left are very, very small. But the material on the right was a little bit larger. And so I did collect both of them. And the one on the right was what I selected for DNA.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201F. Do you recognize that image?
I do.
What is that?
That is a close-up photograph of that material on the right of the shovel, and the blue box on the left indicates the area that I ran for DNA.
And were you able to generate a profile?
I was not.
Your Honor, I talked with the court yesterday about bringing in items or State's Exhibits 172 and 173. I'd like to ask those be brought in now.
They're here.
Okay.
Uh-oh, sounds like we're going to see physical evidence. Hello, Solo, and stay safe in those thunderstorms, Stacy.
Your Honor, is there a handheld microphone?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff.
Ms. Stace, if you could approach this table.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and I see you have your gloves on. Okay. Ms. Days, the shovel that's present on that table, did that have an item number in your lab?
Yes, this was item 36.3.
Okay. What, when you got that shovel, 36.3, and that's States Exhibit 173. I'm just gonna refer to it as the shovel, if that's all right with
Yeah.
you. Okay. When you got that shovel, what did you observe?
There were ashes present on it. It was also dirty. There's various staining on the shaft of the tool. And I did test them for blood, and on this item, they were all negative.
And did you observe anything in the blade area of that shovel?
I did.
What did you observe? And please feel free to show the jury where you observed it.
On the back of the shovel, there's a lip on the back edge, and there was some material adhered to the back of the lip that I thought could be human remains.
And can you just point to where you thought it was?
Right here.
Hello, choppers, teacup.
And did you
Full
do any
630
testing on
mom.
that material?
I did. I performed DNA testing.
And if you want to go ahead and have a seat, and we'll have you come down again in a minute. And Your Honor, I'll continue publishing through the Elmo.
You may.
Do you recognize, I apologize, this is States Exhibit 201G. Do you recognize that item?
I do. It's a picture of that shovel.
The same shovel that we're looking at on this table?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 201H. Do you recognize that picture?
I do. It's a picture I took of that substance that's on the back lip of the shovel. It's circled. And then there's also some very small fragments near it that are pointed to. The one on the left, the larger piece, is what I ran for DNA.
I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Is there a pointer up on that desk?
Yes.
Could you, I realize that it's kind of circled, but if you could just point out to the jury what you see.
Right there.
And you said you collected and tested that.
I did.
I'm glad you did that, Solo. Taking care of yourself.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as 201I. Do you recognize this image?
Yes, that is a photo I took of that material once it was removed from the tool.
And it says it was taken with a stereoscope. What is a stereoscope?
A stereoscope is a type of microscope used to photograph images you can already see with the naked eye. It just gives you better resolution. This is not that photo. This is a photo just with my normal camera.
Okay.
Hey, PKC.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 201J. And what is that?
This is the photograph under that stereoscope of the material, and the blue box on the left is the portion that I ran for DNA.
I'm sorry, I was a little distracted by the light shining off. Can you, what did you do with that?
The portion on the left, I ran for DNA.
Morning, hippie.
And can you point out to the jury any other labels you have on that photograph?
Yes, on the right, you can see that there's some green material caught in this piece of material. And it was visible just on the right side. So I selected the left side for DNA.
Were you able to test that green material?
No,
Is that the type, does Idaho State Lab do that type of testing in
We do not.
Meridian?
No.
Were you able to, in regards to the left portion that you tested, were you able to obtain a DNA profile?
I was.
And how did you do that?
The DNA process starts by breaking open all the cells in the sample to release the DNA. And then I will determine how much DNA I have present in the sample. I will copy the specific locations we look at for forensic DNA testing. And then I will visualize that DNA profile, which looks like peaks on a graph.
And you were successfully able to generate that profile.
I was.
Did you receive any known DNA profiles prior to your testing?
Yes, once we established the parentage for the tooth presumed to be from Tylee Ryan, we used her DNA profile as her reference sample.
And did you compare the DNA profile from this material with Tylee Ryan's sample?
I did.
What were the results of that testing?
The DNA profile from this item matched Tylee Ryan. It is at least 604 octillion times more likely to see this DNA profile if Tylee Ryan is the source than if an unrelated, randomly selected individual from the general population is the source.
Can you say that number one more time?
604 octillion.
How many zeros are in an octillion?
An octillion is 27 zeros.
Thank you. Ms. Dace, can you tell me about lab item 36.1?
It is a pickaxe.
Do you see that lab item in this room today?
I do.
Would you be willing to again approach this table?
Yes.
Good morning, Claudia.
Can you tell well, one, can you hold up and identify that item for the jury?
Yes. The one side has labeling, and then one side has no stickers. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I talked about that.
One side
It's
has
solo. Very
labeling,
sad.
and then the other side does not have any stickers.
Rest in peace to Heels in the
Ms.
Air.
Dace, what, if anything, did you do with this pickaxe? Again, it's States Exhibit 172, lab number 36.1, and for clarity's sake, I will just refer to it as a pickaxe. What did you do with this pickaxe when you received it into your lab?
I examined it for blood, and it did have some stains that tested positive for blood. I also examined the head of the tool, which was dirty, and I removed the dirt that was adhered to the surface. And underneath that dirt, I found what I thought could be ashes and human remains embedded in the eye of this pickaxe, which is right here. And I collected those, photographed them, and then I ran some of it for DNA.
So when you received that item, it didn't look the same way it does today, correct?
Correct.
And you kind of described it, but if you could just describe what it looked like when you received it.
All of these circles that you may see, I made those. So those were not there. And again, it was dirty. The blade had a fair amount of light brown dirt adhered. And so again, I had to remove it. I also ultimately swabbed the head of this item. So I have swabbed this whole area. So it's much less dirty than it was. There did appear to be some possible burn marks in the item as well, in addition to the burnt material that appeared to be inside the eye.
You can go back to the stand.
Just really quick, I did want to point out, there are 2 stains here on the pickaxe, and I did ultimately run those for DNA as well.
Ms. Dace, I'm going to show you on the Elmo what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201K. Do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, that is the pickaxe we just looked at.
The same pickaxe that's on the table in the courtroom.
Correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as 201L. And if you can describe for the jury what you see in this picture.
So on the leftmost side of the photo, there's what appeared to be dirt. That was the top surface of what I was examining. And so I removed it and put it off to the side. And then in the middle, what you see is that darker material that was embedded around the eye. And I also collected that separately and took a photo of it. And then ultimately I went back through it looking for anything I thought I could run for DNA.
And were you able to find anything that you could run for DNA in that?
I was.
You to look at State's Exhibit 201M. You recognize that image?
I do.
What is that?
That is a photograph of some stains on the handle that tested positive for blood.
Were those the 2 you pointed out to the jury?
They were.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's 201O. If you can tell the jury what you observed in this image and what you were doing.
So that is a photo of the tool once I removed that top layer of dirt, and I haven't removed the dark material from the eye. As you can see, it's all around the shaft, and it's a little hard to see because it's dark, but it's basically in between the metal and the shaft as well, and then it's adhered to the surface of it.
And now I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201N. What is that?
That is a photograph of some of the larger pieces of material that I removed from that dark pile of debris from the eye.
I'll show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201P. You recognize that picture?
I do.
And what does it represent?
It is a portion of what was in the previous photo. It was the largest piece of material I found.
What did you do with that?
The area in the blue box is the portion that I ran for DNA.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that subject?
I did. I obtained a partial DNA profile.
And can you explain for the jury what a partial DNA profile is?
It means that at some of the locations we tested, we did not get results. That's very common in samples with a low level of DNA or samples that are degraded.
And when you say degraded, what could cause degradation?
Heat. So being subjected to a fire could cause that degradation.
And when you obtain a partial DNA profile, are you still able to do a comparative analysis against a known profile?
In this case, yes.
Um, Is it accepted in the scientific community to do a comparative analysis with a partial profile?
Yes,
What were and in this case, did you do that comparative analysis?
I did.
What did you compare it against?
I compared it against the known reference samples I had in this case.
And can you just remind the jury what those known reference samples were?
At this time that I was doing this examination, I had a reference sample from JJ Vallow, Tylee Ryan, Lori Vallow, and Chad Daybell.
And from your comparative analysis, did you come to any conclusions?
Yes, Tylee Ryan was a possible contributor to that partial DNA profile. It is at least 159 trillion times more likely to see this DNA profile if it originated from Tylee Ryan than if it originated from an unrelated, randomly selected individual from the general population.
And again, that's kind of, for lack of a better word, scientific speaking, just from a layman's perspective, how would you describe that?
So it means that all of the locations we tested where we had information, the peaks that were present were the same peaks that were present in Tylee Ryan's reference sample.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to State's Exhibit 201M.
That wasn't less sciencey though.
You mentioned, I believe, that you did some testing on those two spots.
Yes, I tested them together for DNA.
And did they initially test positive for blood?
They did.
And can you tell the jury how the process by which you performed your DNA testing on that blood, on those blood spots?
It was the same as what I explained previously. I would swab those stains, and then I would break open all of the cells, determine how much DNA is present, copy those locations that I test, and then visualize that DNA profile. And if I do get a DNA profile, I will ultimately make comparisons to reference samples in the case.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from those samples?
I was.
And did you perform a comparative analysis between that profile and any other known profiles?
Yes,
Were you able to reach a conclusion from that comparative analysis?
I was.
What was it?
This DNA profile also matched Tylee Ryan. And again, it is 604 octillion times more likely to see this DNA profile if Tylee Ryan is the source than if an unrelated, randomly selected individual from the general population is the source.
Ms. Dace, you spoke earlier about examining duct tape.
I did.
Is there a priority of different types of forensic testing for an item such as duct tape?
For this case, given the amount of blood and decomposition fluid and skin that was present on quite a bit of the tape, it was going to be difficult to find foreign DNA. And so we did collect hairs and fibers, but ultimately we gave the preference or the priority to latent prints that could better establish a direct connection between the tape and the person who handled it.
And you mentioned collecting hairs.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 201Q. I don't know if you'll be able to make out what's on there, but do you recall taking these pictures?
I do.
And I understand it's difficult to see after it's been photocopied, but what was this a picture of?
Each one of these adhesives contains one or more hairs and fibers that were collected from the tape pieces we examined.
And State's Exhibit 201R. What do you observe there?
Those again are more hairs and fibers collected. If you can see the yellow circles on the yellow up at the top, those are indicating where those are.
And are these some of the hairs that were collected from the tape and plastic that was wrapped around JJ?
Yes,
Did you attempt to obtain DNA profiles from any hairs in this case?
yes, we ran several hairs for DNA.
Were you able to generate any profiles?
No,
And so if you don't have a profile, you can't compare it to a known profile, correct?
correct.
Are you, Ms. Stace, are you aware if any of the hairs collected were sent to private labs?
Yes, I believe some of them were.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 200. Court and counsel have courtesy copies, and I believe this will come in by way of stipulation.
Okay, exhibit 200's been offered. Is there any objection from the defense to admitting it?
There would be no objection.
All right, exhibit 200 is admitted.
Ms. Stace, if you can just briefly look at that. Are you familiar with that document?
I am.
What is it?
This is a report from Bodie Technology, which is a laboratory in Virginia.
And Your Honor, if I may publish that.
You may.
And are you aware of what items were sent to Bodie Laboratory?
As one of the hairs that I collected from the tape on the, what we called the body bag. So the tape and plastic that the whole body was wrapped in.
Now, to be clear, you did not perform this testing.
Correct.
Are you familiar with the type of testing that was performed and documented in this report?
Yes, the DNA typing technology is the same that I use.
And in Ms. Stace, understanding that this is not your report, but that this is an item stipulated to by the parties. If you could just briefly at the top up here describe the item numbers that were sent.
S25, which is a DNA extraction of the known reference sample of Lori Vallow. B23, which is the DNA extraction sample for Tylee Ryan. And item 46, which appears to be the reference DNA extraction of Melanie Gibb.
And I'm going to point your attention to here where it says STR processing results, conclusions, and statistics. Could you, and I will make that a little bigger for you. If you could just read that into the record.
DNA profiles were provided for the following samples: S25, Lori Vallow, Daybell, V23, Tylee Ryan, and 46, Melanie Gibb.
And if you'd read the next couple paragraphs there.
The partial DNA profile obtained from sample CCB 2235-0241-E-01 is consistent with a female contributor, female 1. This partial DNA profile matches the DNA profile provided by Lori Vallow Daybell. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual with this partial DNA profile is at least 1 in 71 billion in the US population.
I'm not going to ask you to read the rest of that. So this was, to your knowledge, a hair collected from black bags wrapped around JJ Vallow?
Yes, it is given the item number 11.16.8B. That is the piece of tape labeled number 8 by our laboratory, and that was one of the hairs from that tape.
Okay, so from the tape on the black bags?
Yes,
Okay. And from your understanding of this report, they tested it against Tylee Ryan, Lori Vallow, and Melanie Gibb,
correct.
and it matched for Lori Vallow.
Yes, as a partial DNA profile.
Your Honor, may I have a brief sidebar?
Yes.
As we fast forward, so if you caught that, there was hair in a duct tape that was wrapped around the plastic bag around JJ's body. That was Lori's hair. And now they're sidebarring.
Which is Defense Exhibit 35 and 36.
Okay, we'll get those for you.
In addition, Judge, I'm going to move for Defense Exhibit 48, which represents the Bode Laboratory report. My understanding is this is being, there's a stipulation regarding the admission of Exhibit 48. It's been previously provided to the state.
Any objection on 48?
The state doesn't have an objection to the Bode lab report coming in. I do believe we've already just admitted it, though. So I don't know if we want two exhibits with two identical exhibits with different numbers.
Okay,
And I'll
we
just
do
leave that
have
to
the
the court.
Bode Technology Laboratory report, 3 pages, that's already states Exhibit 200.
Yes,
Is that the same thing as Exhibit 48?
from my understanding, it is.
I'm going to need my,
Also let you review Exhibit 200, because if they are exactly the same, then we don't need cumulative identical exhibits.
Well, I don't know if we can get ritualistic just from the hair being in there, but I think it's not hard to assume it was ritualistic based on these people's whacked out beliefs, you know?
my Exhibit 48 also includes some of the chain of custody information as well as a complete report, including all of the analysis. It appears to have about 180 pages.
Okay, if that's the case, then those would be different exhibits, so it wouldn't be cumulative. Mr. Wood, has the state been able to consider whether or not there's an objection to Exhibit 48?
Your Honor, there is no objection to that.
Okay, so defendant's Exhibit 48 is admitted.
Judge, could I have just a quick moment with Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Her hair could have transferred, you know, for instance, her hair could have, it wasn't, they don't know how long the hair was in that duct tape or on the bag. It could have been transferred, you know, from Alex.
Judge, in addition, defense has an Exhibit 49, which is an Astria report. That's entered by way of stipulation of the parties. It's the understanding that Ms. Dace is not going to be discussing the Astria report today.
Correct.
However, we are agreeing to enter that report with further discussion on that report potentially in the future.
And Your Honor, the state's position is we're not going to object today to that. However, at some point, if there is not someone qualified to speak to it, we would renew an objection.
Okay, at this point, although there's a stipulation, if this witness has nothing to say about the report and where it is a technical report, I'm going to deny admitting it at this time without prejudice to renew an offer to readmit it if someone's qualified to discuss what it means. So Exhibit 49 is not admitted at this time.
I mean, I think we've seen that these people make everything ritualistic to justify the most heinous and disgusting and immoral acts, right? So what
And Judge, may I
they
proceed?
Yes.
was
Thank you,
the
Your Honor.
most disgusting, immoral act. So of course they made it into a ritual.
Ms. Dace, can you tell me approximately how many tools you were provided to you in this case for your analysis?
I believe there were 18.
Okay. And did you test all 18 tools?
I did.
Okay. And you had mentioned something about the positive for blood. On how many of those tools did you obtain had a positive test for some sort of blood?
I would need to look at my report to be sure.
Do you have your report here today?
Yes,
May I, Judge, may I have Ms. Dace be provided to her report? And then Ms. Dace, I'm sure you're well aware, you review your report and when you're done, set it down.
Tested positive for blood.
And were you able to determine whose blood were on all 10 of those? I'm sorry, how many?
9.
None.
Yeah.
Of the 10 you initially tested, the 9 were positive for blood. Did you do any follow-up to determine whose blood was on those 9 tools?
No, all of those stains were very small, and they were consumptive for testing.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that your occupation obviously is to do DNA analysis of things for the state police. Is that right?
Yes, our laboratory serves all Idaho law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices and public defenders' offices.
Okay. And can you talk to me a little bit about the manner in which DNA can be in terms of how DNA gets on various tools?
Well, there's more than one way. So obviously the most direct way is primary transfer, which is the blood or whatever we're looking for makes direct contact with that tool and leaves it behind. There's also what's called secondary transfer, which is if the blood was on something else and then it touched another object, it could potentially transfer. Dried staining is much harder to transfer, but when it comes to things like handler or touch DNA, that can be more common.
And that's not the only limitation on DNA. DNA can be placed on an item by way of something like sweat.
Oh, yes, yes. So there's different ways to leave DNA. Obviously, the major fluids are blood, semen, saliva. There's urine, hair, as we talked about, and then also what we would call wearer DNA or handler DNA. So I'm leaving behind DNA on my suit jacket right now from wearing it, from sweat and just skin cells, or the gloves I was wearing earlier, my DNA is likely now on the inside from wearing them.
So in any situation,
I've
such
never
as
heard
the
of
pen
wear
that I'm holding
DNA.
right now, when I set this down and someone were to take this, there's a strong likelihood that my DNA would be on this pen.
Yes, it's possible.
And that would be in the way of skin cells.
Yes,
It could be by way of perspiration.
correct.
It could be by way of just my breath, breathing, and please forgive me if I spit or if there's some sort of air fluid that comes out. My DNA could be found on that as well by way of me just simply breathing on this pen, correct?
Yes.
And the second set of tools, you said the first 10, then how many did you look at after that?
It would have been 8.
Okay, and on the 8 of those 8 remaining, we've already talked about the first 10 and the 9 of them had blood stains on them, right?
And potential blood stains.
Okay. And then of the remaining 8, how many of those had any indications of DNA on them?
None.
Okay. And on all of these 18 tools, did you examine all 18 tools?
I did.
Okay. On any of these 18 tools, well, let me preface it with this. Was it your understanding that these 18 tools came from the garage of Chad Daybell?
Yes.
And when did you get possession of these tools, on what day?
I would need to look at our laboratory report.
And Mr. Bailiff, I'm sorry, you're working overtime today.
10 were obtained on July 30th.
And then the second 8,
Um,
second set of 8,
Yes.
excuse me.
sorry. Those were also on July 30th.
Okay.
I did not examine all 18 at the same time, so I have a report with the first 10 and then a report with the second 8.
And the year that these were obtained would have been what?
2020.
Okay. And are you aware of the date of the allegations as to when JJ and Tylee were placed on Mr. Daybell's property?
I believe it was in 2019.
September of 2019 sound correctly?
Yes.
So the time between the allegations and the testing would have amounted to about how much time?
From September to July, so almost a year. 10
10
months.
months.
Yeah.
I had to count with my fingers. Probably both of us did.
Yes.
Okay. And in the interim between September and July, well, actually before September, we don't know who had contact with those tools, do we?
No,
We don't know how that DNA got on those tools, do we?
I do not.
What we know is that they were found in Mr. Daybell's garage, correct?
That's correct.
So the presumption is that at least in part, being on Mr. Daybell's property, they may have been the ownership of Mr. Daybell, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And on the 18 tools that you tested, how many of those had Mr. Daybell's DNA on them?
None of the stains or material I tested had Chad Daybell's DNA.
What about the handles of all of those tools? Did you find Mr. Daybell's DNA on any of the handles?
We did not swab the handles for DNA. We generally do not do that testing upfront when the ownership of the item is not in question.
But there's no certainty as to who handled those tools, is that right?
No, and if they had been owned at the property for years prior to the crime, you would expect to find any of the family members' DNA on there through non-criminal means, such as buying the shovel, using the shovel in a different day, things like that.
So in fact, if someone had owned those tools for some time, it would be your expectation that at least somewhere on the tools, you would have found Mr. Daybell's DNA. Would that be fair?
Yeah, yes, it's fair.
And it doesn't necessarily mean the handle, the base or the shaft of the, you tested the shafts of these, obviously, correct?
I did not run those samples for DNA. I simply swabbed them for preservation.
Okay. And when you did that, at no time on the shafts of these handles or even on the blades of these handles, did you ever find any of Mr. Daybell's DNA? Is that correct?
I did not run those samples for DNA, but nothing I did run for DNA had Chad Daybell's DNA on it.
The necklace that was found on the property, did you find any latent fingerprints or any DNA of anyone on that?
I did not do latent print analysis. That is not my specialty. And I did find some possible material on the necklace that I could have run for DNA. However, it's consumptive. So I did not get a request to consume it.
And Judge, I previously admitted Defense Exhibit 35. Could I have permission
Use
to
the
publish?
microphone, please, Mr. Pryor.
I previously submitted Defense Exhibit 35. Could I have permission to publish?
Yes.
You know, since we since we take so many shots at Pryor, I just wanted to acknowledge that I noticed at the end of the day yesterday, Judge didn't have to tell him not to interrupt, right? And Judge hasn't had to tell him not to interrupt today either.
Ms. Stace, I don't know if you can
So I just have to give credit where
see
credit's
that or
due.
not.
Yes.
Do you recognize any of those tools?
They do appear to be some of the tools that I received.
Could you reference which subpart of that is? It is, Mr. Pryor, for the record.
I believe that's 35F, Judge.
Thank you.
And Judge, if we could turn off the HDMI for just a moment, please.
Okay. Stop the publication. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Judge, again, if we could publish again, please.
Yes, you can publish, and if it's different than 35F, explain what it is, please.
And again, do you recognize any of these tools as well?
Yes, some of them appear to be the tools that I received.
Now, I zoomed in under the black shovel and the rake at the handle of the long black shovel. You see that?
The snow shovel?
Under the snow shovel and the hard rake, there is a gray handled or a brown wood handled shovel. There's a shovel with black, which is black on it, and then the yellow one, and the one in between the yellow and the brown handled shovel. Do you see that one?
Yes, I do.
Can you take a close look at that shovel for me?
I believe it is one of the tools that I received.
Okay, and then down at the bottom of the black, I'm detecting a certain substance on that. Do you see that, or some sort of different coloring? Do you see that?
The off-white type staining?
The off-white texture on the black handle. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Judge, we can,
Which is that, Mr. Pryor?
Judge, this is 35I, 35I, Judge.
All right, thank you.
And Judge, can we stop publication at this point?
Yes.
Judge, could I have the State's Exhibit 201A?
Okay. Exhibit 201A is being given to you, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. We could use the Elmo, Judge. Now, Ms. Dace, I can't zero in. That looks like the same shovel we talked about with the previous picture that had the white markings on them. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did any time when you obtained this picture, did you observe those same white markings on the bottom of this shovel?
I do not recall. I do take photos of the items, but I can't be sure if they're there and it's hard to see in the lighting or not.
Okay, okay. But at no time you would remove any observable or debris on any item like that, would you?
I mean, I did for all of these tools remove some trace evidence like hairs and fibers. There were some cobwebs on some of the items. And I did on the tools heads remove dirt and gentle ashes that were present so that I could better visualize and swab the surfaces. All of that was retained though.
Okay, but you didn't on the actual black part of the handle of this item, you didn't wipe this down or remove any debris. That wouldn't be something you would do, correct?
I wouldn't wipe it down. I do believe on a few of the tools, I collected some fragments from the handles, but I did not swab the handles.
Okay, and this is a true and accurate a picture of the shovel that you received at the time for your testing. Would that be fair?
That is one of my pictures. I can't be sure if that's the exact picture when I opened it, or if this is the one I took later to document my swabbing and analysis.
But it would be fair to say that that picture, you other than taking the samples off of the blade of the shovel and maybe on the lower handle, it is not changed in appearance from when you first received the shovel. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Judge, I'm done. When you were conducting your investigation of the plastic and the tape, you talked about some DNA that was found on a piece of tape. Is that right?
Yes.
And whose DNA was that?
It was JJ Vallows.
Okay. And then other DNA was found on some of the plastic. Is that what you?
No, that was the only sample from the plastic or tape that I obtained a DNA profile from.
And then the hair samples came from where?
The tape that was on that plastic.
So those hair samples weren't just floating freely, they were attached to the actual tape.
Correct.
So at some point, do I understand that the hair samples were, and this is not a technical term, please forgive me. The sticky side of the tape, is that where the hair samples were found?
Yes, the adhesive side of the tape.
The adhesive side. Thank you for the word. The adhesive side of the tape is where these were found. Is that right?
Correct.
So the suggestion would be that however the hairs got on that, and we don't know that how, right?
Correct.
At least the adhesive side was in a position where the hairs could come in contact with the adhesive and stick to the adhesive. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. And again, how many hair samples did you gather?
I am not sure. There are a lot.
Okay. Would you need to be able to refresh your recollection with your notes?
I do have all of the hairs itemized. However, some of those adhesives have multiple hairs on them. So it would take a little bit of time to count them all.
Okay.
But I know that I had adhesives going from A to Z, so 26, and then an AA and a BB. So there were 28 adhesives, and then there were one or more hairs on each one of those.
So multiple hairs.
Yes, multiple hairs and fibers, and multiple hairs that we determined could be possibly tested for DNA.
And those hairs were located at different times as part of this investigation. Would that be fair?
Yes, the majority of the hairs that were collected initially prior to latent print processing to protect them from what was the initial latent print processing. And then when I went back and swabbed the unidentifiable fingerprint reach detail on the tape, I did locate a few more that I collected separately.
And do you recall approximate dates as to when the first set of hairs were found and then the second set of hairs were found?
I would need to look at my reports.
Could we provide that, Mr. Bailiff? Would you mind, please? Judge, in the interest of time, I don't know if the court has an interest in taking a break and allowing her to look at that so that we could accomplish that at the same time. I'll obviously defer to the state's position in the court.
Yeah, I think it's a logical time to take a mid-morning recess, so we'll go ahead and do that at this time. We'll come back on at 10:25, so we'll take a 20-minute break and come back then. Thank you.
All right, please.
So they took a break. They're still on it. They should be back anytime. Not too long from now. Yep. Depression does tend to kick up around important days. That is what happens. And so love to all of you who are experiencing that kind of feeling. So what we've just heard basically is similar to what we heard in Lori Vallow's trial. Most of what we just heard was already testified to. And I don't think we've really heard much different, which is that in the DNA samples that they found on the black bag and the tools and the duct tape, there was not much to test for, but they did test and they found DNA of Tylee, they found DNA of JJ, and they found one of Lori's hair. And it was, just one. So the question would be, how did Lori's hair get from wherever she was to a piece of duct tape that was wrapped around a plastic bag that was wrapped around JJ? And could it have been, now, my understanding, if I recall correctly, is that they were able to determine that the bags that were used around on JJ, which is such a horrible thing to say, wonderful, horrible thing to say, were from Lori's house. Like, they were taken from Lori's house. Like, they can actually track the actual detailed location of where a bag was purchased, a specific bag was purchased, and then where it came from. So hold on. Y'all, I just want to acknowledge that, there's a person in the true crime community who just literally suddenly died. And last night, I mean, she was in the middle of a stream and she fell and had to go to the hospital. And then it was announced that she died. And, apparently she had been on hospice for some time and she had COPD, but she was not ready to die. According to her friend, I'm not speaking for her. She's not ready to die. And I can tell you that I had a conversation with her, I want to say like 2 weeks ago, because we were planning to do a panel about JLR. And, she, as much as I am the historian on Rocket Man's horrible behavior on YouTube, she's the historian on JLR. And we were planning to do a panel about how we don't feel like he's really changed from the fraudster that he that put him in jail many years ago. And I'm sorry if anybody here likes JLR. I understand. You are all welcome to your opinion about him. I understand. But I personally have, a different opinion. Doesn't mean I want to go after him or anything like that. But all this to say that she and I had a conversation about that. And she had sent me some unfinished videos that she was planning to put together. She was already planning these videos herself, but she was sharing them with me to see, what do you think? She was getting my input and stuff like that. And they were and they would potentially be used for our panel, but unfortunately, we weren't ever able to do the panel because things just got too crazy with the two. She was very heavily covering the Karen Reed trial. She felt very, very strongly that Karen Reed was guilty. So she was streaming the Karen Reed trial on her channel. And then I got super busy with the Chad Daybell trial. And we were like, okay, let's just put it on hold. We got time. We got time. And then wake up this morning to find out that she's no longer with us. She has a child. She has a daughter, a grown daughter. And I was just sitting here thinking about that daughter who just lost her mom, days before Mother's Day. And Heels in the Air was a really good friend with Web Sleuth. Trisha from Web Sleuth. So Web Sleuth was on Queen Bee's panel last night, and I was listening to what she was saying. And Heels is apparently 2 of Heels' siblings died recently in the last year or something like that. I don't know. I don't know the details. But the point is that Heels' mother has now lost basically 3 children. And now this fairly unexpected. She was sick, yes. But she had been very sick for quite some time, and she was still, I didn't even know she was that sick. When I talked to her, she mentioned something to me about oxygen, and I didn't ask. I don't like to pry into people's personal lives. I didn't say oxygen. What do you mean oxygen? I just don't. I don't like prying into people's personal lives unless they talk about it. So, I just want to send a prayer out to anyone who cared about and loved Heels. I want to thank Heels for the contribution. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Teacup. I'm sorry to anybody who's lost people in that way. It's really sad. I want to thank Heels for her contribution to the true crime community. She has this really catchy and unforgettable intro to her videos that is so adorable. And I want to just play it for you because it's always adorable. It's always brings you right into it's a Heels video, right? So here, let me Are you coming to get me? Send the big bad wolf to fetch me. Her channel is called Heels in the Air. And she a lot of people would continue her a clip channel, but she also went live, and she was doing a bunch of live. She was see this. She was covering the Karen Reed trial, and she felt very, very, very strongly that Karen Reed was guilty, and she put together a very strong, compelling case for it. I tend to try not to have such strong feelings about a case until after the trial. Yes, she has, Patricia. Last night. So, it's a great intro. Everybody, and I am on my other channel, Checkmate Humanity. I've used clips from many, many, many of her videos. Because they're very helpful. She was able to clip a lot of the most, a lot of the worst moments of some of these, some of the tragedy pimps. Let's just check this one. I like the ones with it. I want to find the intro with the dancing kids. She always had these great dancing kid intros.
Are you coming to get me? Send the big bad wolf to fetch me. I've been staging a protest, swapping guns for roses. Resorted to reverie, campaigners for liberty. Here to render a legacy. We are the dreamers and the party queens.
Go check here. I'll give you the link to her channel. Go check it out. That is her channel. And here I'll give you the link to the stream where they talked about it. This is the link where I found out about it. I woke up and saw this stream. Yeah, she had people send in dance videos to her. She was she was a very, very strong lady. A very strong lady, very strong opinions. Let's see if this one has some of the dancing.
Are you coming to get me? Send the big bad wolf to fetch me. I've been staging a protest, swapping guns for roses. Resorted to reverie, campaigners for liberty. Here to render a legacy. We are the dreamers and the party queens. I just wanna be.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm the one breaking the news to you. I didn't know her well, but I did talk to her a few times, and she was an asset, to the community in terms of very prolific in her videos, very strong in her views. She was always open to talking, open to collaborating, and always. Here's one. Turtle Boy has a documentary deal. So I just wanted to, I was sitting here trying to talk about, Chad Daybell and all this stuff, and seeing things about Mother's Day, and I just can't stop thinking about how her family and her daughter lost her just on the eve of Mother's Day, and that makes me, jeez, spam call. And that's just I had a family loss in fact, my grandfather, who I who I considered my father, died on Father's Day, and Father's Day will never be the same to me, you know. So, um, and I know that, I was thinking about maybe I'm not sure if I'll be up to it, but I won't be able to see my boys on Sunday, this Mother's Day. Not for any other reason than simple logistics. Simple logistics, unfortunately. But I'm sad about it. Of course, I'll be able to talk to them, but I won't be able to see them. So I was thinking about maybe having a, stream for moms who don't get to spend time with their kids on Mother's Day, and now it kind of takes on a sort of more solemn meaning because yeah. And with grief, holidays are always hard in grief. The first time, the first birthday, the first Christmas, the first Easter, or the first Hanukkah or Yom Kippur, or whatever it is in your traditions, or even just any holiday that comes up, you start to feel what's missing, right? You start to think about past holidays, and then you start to think about what's missing. And so what I've started to try to do to combat that is just for myself, and hopefully this will help other people who deal with grief. Because I don't know, I'm just a big baby when it comes to grief. I hate death, and I need to learn how to accept death because it does happen in life. We have to learn to accept death, right? So what I do to combat that is tell myself I am lucky to have had that person in my life to have loved, right? And just remember
All rise. Good report, you got a second?
Thank you. Please be seated.
the reason I'm feeling the pain is because I loved them so much, and man, I'm so lucky to.
Have the jurors brought in, please.
All right, they're back. So I'm sorry to be
Yes.
sorry to any of you who that was news to about Heels in the Air. And prayers to everyone affected by that. What a horrible day to find that out, Music City Mom. What kind of a doctor tells their
All right, please.
patient that on Christmas? Oh, that makes sense. Wow.
Thank you. Please be seated.
I'm so sorry, Patricia. I'm so sorry.
All right, Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to continue with cross, we're back on the record on CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chat Guy Daybell after the mid-morning break, and you may continue with your cross.
And Judge, can I have the last question read back to me, please? Thank you.
Yeah, holidays can be
The
real
initial
serious.
hair collection was done in June of 2020. And then the second round of hair collection was done in December of 2022. And I also wanted to clarify one thing. When I said that there were 28 adhesives collected, that was actually just off one piece of tape. So there were actually quite a few more. There were an additional 14 collections done on that item.
Okay. And let's start with the one piece of tape and you said the one piece of tape had how many pieces of hair?
28 collections, and some of those had more than one. That does include both hairs and fibers.
Are you in a position to testify today about whose hairs those were?
No.
Okay. That was sent off to another lab, is that right?
With the exception of the Bodie hair that we talked about earlier, the rest were done at a different laboratory.
And in regards to the Bodie hair and the other hairs, think you said like 14 other hairs? On the
There
t-
were 15 total collections of hairs, and then each collection had uh, one or more hairs and fibers inside.
Okay. And in relation to the hair of Lori Vallow, were there other hairs in close proximity to that hair on the tape?
I believe that that collection had multiple hairs.
Okay.
Yes.
And I talked about this a little bit before, but that the adhesive side, and thank you, the adhesive side is how you noted those hairs. So the adhesive side was pulled out and you found the hairs on the adhesive side, correct?
Correct.
And the presumption is that at some point the adhesive side was down as part of the wrapping around JJ, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then you mentioned the second set of hairs, and those were in December of 2022.
Yes, that was after the tape had been processed for latent prints, and I was swabbing that unidentifiable ridge detail. There were just a few more that I found still embedded in the tape.
And when you say a few more, how many are we talking about?
I would need to refer to my notes,
Okay.
less than 20.
Okay. And at some point, is it your understanding, caught myself, is it your understanding that it's possible to obtain DNA from hair samples?
Correct. For the type of testing that I do, we need a root present. That is where the nuclear DNA is present. There are other types of testing that can be done on hairs without roots.
Right. So in essence, what I understand I'm hearing is that DNA can be pulled and derived from hair samples, correct?
It can be. It's somewhat hit or miss.
Okay. And but as far as the latent prints, did you do DNA testing on those latent prints as well?
I did. And again, only one of those had a DNA profile, and that was consistent with JJ Vallow.
Okay.
And that was from the tape from his hands.
Okay. Now you talked about originally, you spoke of the various ways that DNA can be found on some of these tools, correct?
Yes.
And it could be done by way of sweat.
For handler DNA or just touch DNA, yes.
Okay. And then as far as breathing on something, if there was spit or moisture or even the breath can leave a sample of DNA, correct?
Correct.
And in addition, if the person actually touches it with their hand, could be particles from the hand that would leave it as well, correct?
Yes, skin cells could be left behind on that item.
Okay. And your testimony was that it was your belief that because these tools were in Chad Daybell's garage, that you would expect to find Mr. Daybell's DNA on them, correct?
That's very reasonable, yes.
Okay. Now, your investigation was targeted at that point to assume that you weren't going to test those handles, or at least the handle portions, because you would have already assumed that Mr. Daybell was on there. Is that correct?
Well, when they were requested for blood and human remains. In order to swab them, that would have been consumptive. And on at least one of the tools, there was also the possibility of getting latent prints. So you would want to make that decision before we just went ahead and swabbed it if you had wanted it, or if anyone had wanted a different testing
And
method.
at no point, nobody requested that they wanted that, correct?
No.
Did they request, and the request would have come from the police to you, is that right?
Yes, or the court.
Law enforcement,
Yes.
okay. Or the prosecuting attorney?
Yes, or by court order.
by court order. Okay. And in this situation, who was the one who provided you with the request to do this testing?
This would have been the police department investigating.
Okay. And at some point, you determined you weren't going to go further with DNA testing of the entire tools for Chad Daybell. Did you happen to get a request to test any and all of the tools for the possible DNA of Alex Cox?
That would have again fallen under the same swabbing of the handles.
What does that mean?
So as I mentioned, we did not receive a request for that. And then on at least one or more of the tools, you would have had to make a decision whether or not you wanted handler DNA or potential latent prints, because they would be looking at the same area.
But don't I understand that you didn't look for any DNA on the handles, isn't that correct?
Correct. Again, swabbing it on an item that maybe could have latents would destroy the latent print. So we were under some guidelines not to consume evidence during portions of the investigation. And so that decision was made not to potentially damage evidence.
And you're not aware, it's not your department to determine whether there were latent prints on the handles of these tools, right? That's a different department.
Correct.
So on one hand, your department looks for DNA, the other department looks for latent prints.
Yes, and we do work in concert, but there are sometimes, especially handles of items, where you might have to just choose one or the other.
But you chose neither on the handles with the DNA or the latent prints, right?
Correct.
And that goes for Alex Cox, correct?
Correct.
What about Melanie Gibb? Did you get any kind of authorization to test for either latent prints or DNA for Melanie Gibb on any of the tools?
No.
What about David Warwick? Did you test for latent prints or DNA on any of the tools for David Warwick?
No.
What about for Lori Vallow? Did you test for DNA or latent prints on any of the handles of the tools for Lori Vallow?
No, if I had swabbed them, everyone that I had a reference sample would have been compared to those samples, but we did not swab them.
And you weren't asked to do that, is that right?
Correct.
Now, I want to touch a little bit about soil and DNA. And you're smiling. Do you know where I'm going?
No.
Okay. That's why you're smiling.
Oh, stop
Well,
it.
Isn't it true that in a situation where there's a body put in the ground, that the DNA can filter into the surrounding soil?
I suppose so, in the form of decomposition and the fluids that are released.
Okay. And if someone were to shovel around the soil, if there's decomposition or if there's any other particles and they have contact with those, that could be a source of DNA on any of the shovels, correct?
Potentially.
Okay. Can you tell me the date and time that the DNA and latent prints that you found were placed on those, or were found, or strike that, Judge, I apologize. Give me a moment. Can you tell me, I want to make sure, the date and time that the DNA came to be put on those tools?
I cannot.
Okay. Can you tell me the date and time when any latent prints would be put on those tools?
I cannot.
You can't ascertain when the DNA was on there. The only thing you're doing today is determining that there was DNA.
Correct.
And if I understand correctly, there's no DNA of any kind that you are responsible for of Chad Daybell. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the DNA that you found on the tools had the DNA of Tylee,
It did.
okay? And you didn't check for Alex Cox, correct?
No, the only samples I ran were, again, blood or potential human remains.
And you didn't check for Melanie Gibb, right?
No.
And you were testing DNA in general on these tools. It wasn't that. Well, were you targeting it for just Tylee when you did your evaluation?
No, it's compared to all the reference samples that we had at that time.
So in other words, if whoever provides you with the reference samples, you use their reference samples and are limited to that target group of reference samples when you make your decision. Is that right?
For this case, yes.
Okay. Okay. And as far as other DNA found in the way of a hair sample, Lori Vallow was the only other identification that you made at this point, correct?
That identification was made by Bodie Labs.
Okay. And then the additional hairs that were sent off, that's for a future time potentially, correct?
I did not send those out. I simply collected them and then they were ultimately returned to the agency.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, Judge, I don't think I have anything else.
All right, that'll conclude cross-examination then. Redirect.
We should make him a
Just
shirt.
very briefly, Your Honor.
What about Melanie Gibb?
Ms. Stace, in some of the questions you just answered, you mentioned consumptive testing.
Yes.
What does it mean when you say consumptive testing?
It means that in order to obtain a DNA profile, we would need to use the entire sample. So on a very small blood stain or the root of a hair, you would only get one try at it.
Is it fair to say that one of your guidelines is you generally try to preserve evidence as much as possible?
That's leading.
Overruled.
Yes, it is our policy to receive permission to consume evidence in cases.
And you were asked about the amount of DNA testing you do, or you did in this case. Have you ever been on a case where you tested every single possible DNA sample?
In general, on a big case, no. I mean, there's sometimes where there's only one in a small case, but in a large case, no. It is our policy that we test to answer questions and then do our best not to overly consume evidence, just to test more of the same thing.
And you were asked about testing against Melanie Gibb. You did see that Bodie lab report, correct?
I did.
And was Melanie Gibb one of the test subjects in that?
She was.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Judge, I'd like some follow-up based on the,
Your Honor, I didn't go anywhere that he didn't go and cross.
Yeah, I agree. There's no recross.
Yeah, where does he think he's going?
Correct. So that'll conclude the testimony.
He wanted to
Of
bring up
Ms.
Melanie
Stace.
Gibb again, probably.
Is the state intending to keep her under subpoena or recall her?
Your Honor, at this point, the state would probably keep Ms. Stace under subpoena.
Okay, so Ms. Dace, there is an exclusionary order, meaning witnesses shouldn't be watching or viewing in any way the testimony given in trial. So because you still may be recalled, I'll admonish you not to watch the proceedings since they are available to watch where the trial is being streamed online. If you are released from your subpoena, you'll be contacted by the state or the court to advise you of that, and then that order would be lifted. So thank you for coming in and testifying. That will conclude your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
All right, if the state would like to call its next witness, you may.
It would call Colin Nesbitt, Your Honor.
okay, yeah.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now that the witness has been sworn, I will inquire, have you had any, have you reviewed at all any of the trial testimony by watching the trial online or any observation here in court?
I have not, sir.
Okay, have you talked to anyone else about testimony they've given during this trial?
No, I haven't.
All right, thank you for answering those questions. Ms. Beatty, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, can you please state your full name and spell your last name?
Colin Drew Nesbitt, Nesbitt.
And where do you work, sir?
The Kauai Police Department in the state of Hawaii.
How long have you worked with the Kauai Police Department?
A little more than 17 years.
And have you been in law enforcement for 17 years, or did you work in a law enforcement position prior to that?
No, that's it.
What exactly is your job title at the Kauai Police Department?
I'm currently a sergeant assigned to the Patrol Services Bureau.
All right. And prior to being a sergeant for patrol services, what was your title?
I was a detective.
Were you a detective for the Kauai Police Department in 2020?
Yes, I was.
What type of training and experience did you have to assist you in your duties as a detective?
I've had roughly 790 hours of basic academy training. And then I've had about 500 additional hours in major crimes.
And what exactly were your job duties as a detective in 2020?
I was assigned to the major crimes unit, so we handled death investigations, sex assaults, and violent crimes.
On January of 25th of 2020, did you have occasion to come into contact with two individuals named Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell?
Yes, I did.
Why did you come into contact with those two individuals on January 25th of 2020?
We were assisting Rexburg Police Department with serving a legal document for Order of Protection Act.
Can you describe what that legal document, the significance of that legal document? What was that legal document?
It was ordering Lori Vallow to bring the JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan back to the Department of Health in Idaho.
And you made contact with Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell that day?
Yes, I did.
Where was this contact?
It was at 4141 Queen Emma Street in Princeville, Hawaii, and they were in the swimming pool area. It's a condo complex.
Okay. And approximately what time was this?
It was served at 2:39 p.m.
Okay, y'all, I hate to cut this short with this seemingly rather nervous witness, but we are 6 minutes away from the sentencing of Adam Montgomery. And I have a live stream scheduled for that, a different live stream. Here is the link. I'm going to end this live stream, and I'm going to fire up my other live stream. And I sincerely hope that you will first hit the thumbs up here, then hit that link and go and head on over to that live stream and join me there and hit the thumbs up there. And let's watch Adam Montgomery finally meet basically his maker, right? So thank you for joining me here. And I will continue the coverage of Chad Daybell's trial tomorrow, but this does take priority because we've been waiting for this for quite some time. So I'm going to end this here, and I will start up the stream momentarily over there, and I hope you will join me. Thank you very much, and I will see you very soon.